Blog Talk Radio.
Constitutionalists, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Dan Clements Show, Christian Political Talk Show. It's episode 796. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior, fighting for your right just to be an American. It is May 10th, and every year of our Lord, I'll get this out, May 10th in the year of our Lord, 2017. Remember, we are a hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and he does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. And it's very sunny outside today. Temperatures are actually starting to warm up. I got my buddy Charcoal back from the vets. My wife took him over yesterday to get him fixed and also get his front paws declawed. I know there's a lot of controversy over that, and I really don't want to hear it. I think it's a personal decision. We got his front claws taken care of. We have some nice furniture in the house. We like to keep it that way. We had our last cat before Charcoal, Tigger Kitty. He was a gray cat. We had him all four paws declawed, and it didn't seem to bother him a bit. They're not outside cats, and any cat we've ever had in our houses have always been an indoor cat because we just don't want to have to deal with the fleas and everything that come along with having a cat. So he's back. He seems to be feeling kind of spry, although he does not like car rides. He meows the whole time he's in the carrier. But we got him back this morning, and I'm glad we got our family back together. Temperance, our Cocker Spaniel, doesn't know how to react because she can smell the stuff on him, and then she knows, animals have this sixth sense about them. Temperance knows that he's hurting, so she hasn't really been messing around with him too much, and he's been laying around. He was laying on my chair here in the studios. I put him over on our bed in our bedroom, and then he got up and went downstairs, was laying down there on the floor down there. So he might be waiting for my wife to get home. My wife's out doing a little bit of shopping. She needed to get some new sneakers and stuff. So we are. I had this show all set up from yesterday, and I don't know what time it was yesterday. This whole thing with James Comey blew up, the firing of James Comey. My Facebook antagonist Kim Eaton was posting stuff that was just out and out lies, and the anti-freedom groups out there, they forget that they wanted him fired last year around June sometime, and also right in the middle of the election they wanted him gone because they felt that he was meddling in the elections and that he was throwing the election for Donald Trump. And we're going to get into all that, the timeline. I got a couple videos I want to show you about that. One is Fox News, and then the other one's a clip from Tucker Carlson's show about this whole mess, about 6 minutes altogether. And I want to show them to you real quickly at the beginning of the show, because this is something that, so I wasn't intending to do this, but, there's something of major importance that actually has been going on for quite a while. And this is just, in my opinion, this is just another example of a mess that President Barack Obama had left for somebody else to clean up. He should have been fired last year. Anytime after last June, President Obama should have fired him. And I don't think, honestly, he would have got the backlash that President Trump's getting now. And it's not, honestly, and again, I'm not a Trump supporter. I hate to have to tell people that. I'm not a Trump supporter. I just want to make sure when I see something unfair that I point this out. And this is definitely unfair to President Trump. The coverage, the propaganda that and actual propaganda, folks, that the lamestream media is pouring out there, and their sycophants in the social media outlets, putting out this false narrative. And just because of their hate of Trump, because they are following a narrative, they quite honestly, and I haven't been proven wrong yet on this, most of the sycophants of the anti-freedom lamestream media out there and their outlets, they don't do the research. They don't check to see if the story's true or not. It fits a narrative that they agree with. Just like climate change. The anti-freedom groups out there have a specific narrative that they follow. And those folks that support these anti-freedom groups out there, they see that narrative. It jives with their victimhood. It jives because, folks, they look at Earth as being a victim. They look at Earth as being a victim, so it jives with their victimhood, with their their status symbol of victimhood. And we talked about this yesterday. So we have this whole narrative out there that's blowing up. And the problem with the anti-freedom groups out there and the lamestream media is they're hoping, this is their problem that they have, they're hoping that people forget about what happened in the past. With propaganda, history is yesterday. History started yesterday. It didn't start 5 or 6 months ago. It started yesterday. And so they're hoping you'll forget about this whole thing. So we got these two videos, and we got this story about James Comey and the Trump administration getting rid of him. One of the things that the groups, and we'll get into this, want you to forget is that the anti-freedom groups out there wanted President Trump to have Sessions recuse himself in the Russian investigation, so he did. The deputy director of the FBI stepped in, and this is actually who the FBI director actually reports to, the deputy director of the Justice Department, and he was running the FBI investigation. And it's just everything that the anti-freedom groups out there wanted happened, and yet it was, in my mind, it was an inevitable outcome. But sooner or later, I thought someone's got to fire Comey. Sooner or later, they have to. Okay, so we have that, and then we have, and this is something I've been tracking. I know I mentioned this before, maybe a month or so ago, but this is something I've been tracking. I think it's starting to come to a head over in Syria. They're called white helmets. And there was an award-winning documentary done in Hollywood about the heroics of the white helmets over there in Syria. And there's a lot of inconsistencies in the stories. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's too long. I encourage you to go do some research on this. It's a letter by Rick Sterling, and he writes an open letter to the Doctors Without Borders. And I'm just wondering if the Doctors Without Borders aren't being used in all this, because, they're on the front lines there. And they would know more than anybody else about the injuries and to the, if they're over there helping treating these Syrian folks who got attacked by gas, especially sarin gas. And yet, how many people in the news, how many of these doctors have been interviewed by the lamestream media, by the anti-freedom groups out there that say that they're going to investigate, like France? Oh, we're going to investigate and get to the bottom of this over in Syria. And I'm sorry, I think France is in a mess, and quite honestly, I think they're going to be taken over by Islam, and I don't want us to go over there and rescue them again. We've rescued them twice. That's enough. If they're that dumb to get in that much trouble a third time, I don't think anybody should go over and rescue them. I think they ought to get out of it themselves, because they won't learn. They won't learn if they don't get out of themselves. But anyway, so there's this controversy. They don't, for whatever reason, One American News Network does not post stories of the day that they're actually broadcasting about of the day on their website till the next day or the following day. So I may not have this exact story that One American News Network's talking about, but they're talking about how CNN is upholding the fake narrative, or the fake story, the propaganda about the white helmets in Syria. And you heard me talk about this on the show many, many times, that something smelt fishy in Denmark about this whole story. And again, it just keeps coming back up time and time again that, yeah, there is something very, very fishy over there. And there's propaganda all over the place. I believe President Trump was faked into, with this propaganda, it was faked into using military force in the form of cruise missiles against a Syrian air base over there. And again, you would think we would have intelligence agencies that are good enough to actually get to the bottom of the truth over there. But, and this is where, and I'll probably get in trouble for this is where my distrust of the CIA comes into, because the CIA has been involved throughout, in this hemisphere and others, in regime change. Going back to Operation Ajax. Google that, Operation Ajax. The CIA and the British Petroleum Company over in Iran. That's where we got the Shah of Iran, a puppet dictator of ours, over there in Iran that did a lot of bad things. So we have these two issues coming up here that really hit my radar hard yesterday. So this is the fastest I've actually turned a show around as far as setting up my notes and getting my sources aligned so I can report on it today, because I think this is very important for my listeners to hear, the folks who follow this show, to actually hear, hopefully, what I think the truth is, or at least put some question out there, some reasonable doubt, where you'll start investigating some of the stuff on your own. All right, as we've been doing lately here, Rocky Mountain High Brands is the official drink of the Dan Clements Show. Full disclosure, I own stock in the company. They're not paying me to say this. I get the drinks. If you look in the picture on the video, over my shoulder, you'll see the empty cans on top of my gun case behind me. I got a gun case in my videos. Good morning, Sword. How you doing? I made them my official drink of the show. The hemp oil that they have that's infused in the drink seems to help with the pain levels. I'm able to go further in the day without hurting so much with my fibromyalgia, and that's a good thing for me, and I'm going to keep that regimen up. And they got a drink for just about any flavor that you want to take on. Also, you'll see me throughout the show drinking out of a coffee cup and a mug, and I know folks on Blog Talk Radio can't see this, but you can on YouTube. On the cup, it has like a patch on it. It says, "I'm a United States military veteran. I once took a solemn oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Be advised, no one has ever relieved me of my duties under that oath." And that is correct. If you go back to your DD-214s and your discharge, you are not relieved from that oath in any of that. And so you'll see my coffee mug along with my handsome mug throughout the day. And here's the coffee mug here that has that on. It's kind of shiny on there, but it's a nice coffee mug. It's one of my specialty mugs I don't use all the time, but it seems to work fairly well. There was a question put in the chat room. Can you please comment on the recent Bitcoin bull run to $1,790? And do you own any Bitcoin? I do not own any Bitcoins, Bitcoins. And quite frankly, Sword, I don't follow economics that way. I do cursorily see Bitcoin news items come up, but I do not know, honestly, and that's something I should study a little bit more, seeing it's a free market coinage on the internet. I don't have anything for you on that. I'd have to do some research on it, get back to you, but I don't have any comments about that. I'm not well versed in Bitcoins, and I apologize for that. So I can only, contrary to what I tell my wife about knowing everything, I can only know so much. I'm well versed in a lot of things. I do think Bitcoin is, from what I understand about Bitcoin, it's a free market online coinage. It's not physical, and it's been in the news lately. And whether it's true, whether the news about it's true or not, whether it's being manipulated or not, I don't know. I just see, like I said, I've seen some of the news on that. I do study economy. like from an Austrian standpoint, I do own stocks. I have mutual funds, and they're all in my retirement portfolio. And so I do know a little bit about that. I know how to research stocks and stuff like that, and understand volumes and stuff. Yeah, and Sword says Bitcoin is the way out of the system, and he's absolutely right. Other ways out of the system is actually to physically own gold, silver. I've actually seen, Sword, where folks are buying up pure copper and holding pure copper. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. But it's not that it's a precious metal, but it is a metal that can be, can be traded and can be, can I say, commoditized, become a commodity. So, all right, real quick here, I want to get to these videos, and I want to set these up real quick here for the folks on. Let me see here. I just need to do something real quick here. I need to get over to them and start this bad boy up. So, okay. This is a timeline of events that led to James Comey firing. This is a Fox News by way of, let's see, Patriot, or Tea Patriot, I think it is. Yeah, Tea Partier, by way of Tea Partier. So let's give this a real quick listen here, and I got another one we'll play right after this one.
Today's firing of FBI Director James Comey is the culmination of tumultuous events surrounding the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails, also the simultaneous investigation into the Trump campaign, and all of that wrapped up in the 2016 election. Trace Gallagher live in our West Coast newsroom with a look back at how we arrived at the events of today. Trace.
And Martha, it's very critical to go over the timeline because, as you've been talking about, the genesis of the Comey firing dates back to July 5th of last year when Director Comey held a news conference saying the FBI had completed its investigation into Hillary Clinton's private server and was passing it along to the Department of Justice to decide whether or not to prosecute. But during the very same news conference, Comey concluded that Clinton had broken no laws and instead was simply careless in handling sensitive or highly classified information. Then, Director Comey said this. Watch.
Although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case.
Critics accused him of simultaneously passing along the case to the Attorney General and then passing along his judgment. Later that summer, while investigating the sexting scandal involving former Congressman Anthony Weiner, the feds confiscated a laptop belonging to Weiner and Clinton advisor Huma Abedin. Then in late October, 10 days before the election, Comey writes a letter to members of Congress reopening the Clinton email investigation, saying emails found on Weiner's laptop were potentially incriminating. Clinton's demand that the FBI release all the information it had was denied, and she still believes to this day the Comey letter may have cost her the election. But Comey's October surprise was followed by a November bombshell when just before the election he writes another letter to Congress saying after further review, the FBI did not find anything new on the laptop. Now fast forward to last week when Director Comey testified on Capitol Hill about the emails, saying that Huma Abedin forwarded hundreds of thousands of emails to her husband's laptop, including some with classified information. Today, the FBI corrected Comey's statement, telling the Senate Judiciary Committee that only a small number of emails had been forwarded and classified emails had not been forwarded. Martha.
Trace, thank you very much.
This is a Fox News alert. FBI Director James Comey has been fired by the President of the United States.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't have my microphone up there. That last clip was by Fox News. And the timeline from June on, the Fox News is reporting about James Comey. I'm a little flustered here now because I'm trying to do everything at once here. Because of the testimony of James Comey and sending it on to the Attorney General, then Lynch, that there was no recommendation for prosecution. And so, you know, that was always strange to anybody who was following that whole thing. Now we have this video clip here with Tucker Carlson discussing this timeline issue also. So let's give this a real quick listen here, and we'll come back right after this is done.
This is a Fox News alert. FBI Director James Comey has been fired by the President of the United States. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Comey's departure came unexpectedly, and for a moment you could almost hear official Washington pause, wondering which talking points to use. And then the barking began. Several Democratic senators have already and predictably called the firing Nixonian, as if you were watching something from during Watergate, but you are not. This firing was overdue, and everyone in Washington knows it. Comey recently went to Boston College and said this about his plans to run the FBI. Watch.
Boston College is a leader in thinking and educating on these incredibly important issues. So this is a great place to have it. Hope you'll do it many more times. You're stuck with me for about another 6.5 years, and so I'd love to be invited back again.
Not true, as it turned out. Comey repeatedly injected himself into political matters that the country's chief investigative figure should stay out of. In 2015, for example, he came out against police body cams right after President Obama endorsed them, effectively undermining the president. At the height of the last presidential campaign, of course, he held that famous press conference about the investigation of Hillary Clinton, even though he was simply announcing that the FBI lacked enough evidence to support a criminal case against her.
Although the Department of Justice makes final decisions on matters like this, we are expressing to Justice our view that no charges are appropriate in this case. I know there will be intense public debate in the wake of this recommendation, as there was throughout the investigation. What I can assure the American people is that this investigation was done honestly, competently, and independently.
This spring, Comey revealed that the FBI was conducting an investigation into alleged coordination between the presidential campaign of Donald Trump and the state of Russia. In exactly the same hearing, he refused to say if the FBI was investigating illegal anti-Trump leaks in the federal government.
Can you assure them that it is going to be investigated?
I can't, but I hope people watching know how seriously we take leaks of classified information. But I don't want to confirm it by saying that we're investigating it. And I'm sorry I have to draw that line. I just think that's the right way to be.
Just a few days ago, meanwhile, Comey impugned Hillary Clinton aide Huma Abedin, dramatically exaggerating the number of emails she'd forwarded to her laptop and that of her husband, Anthony Weiner.
She forwarded hundreds and thousands of emails, some of which contain classified information.
Now, at times, both Republicans and Democrats in Washington seemed to appreciate the help that Comey gave them. But over time, his behavior was turning the Bureau, the FBI, into a key political player, and that's the one thing it is not supposed to be. By the end, it just got strange. Often in the course of a single conversation, you'd hear Democrats praise Comey for not indicting Hillary Clinton, then blame him for her defeat in November, and then turn around again and laud him for his Russia investigation in the hopes that he'd be able to bring down the president. Rarely has there been less principle on display in Washington. That's not all Jim Comey's fault, but he definitely didn't help. What this firing ought to remind us is that ultimately real power in a democracy resides with the voters. When unaccountable forces, whether they're at the CIA or Planned Parenthood or Exxon or the Department of Justice in this case, start making our biggest public policy decisions, we risk losing our democracy. Dictatorship by the unelected, that is the real threat to this country and our traditions. But let's be honest, this firing of James Comey was overdue, and everybody in Washington knows that. Comey was unfit for the office he held. The new president should have canned him the afternoon of the inauguration, but he didn't. Comey was too eccentric to run the FBI and too powerful for any of us to breathe easily while he was there. Just how powerful was James Comey? Let's put it this way. He was feared in a way that no appointed bureaucrat should ever be feared in a free society. Time and again, elected lawmakers on both sides came on this show and expressed worry and concern about his behavior, but they did so only during commercial breaks with the cameras off. Why? Because they were terrified at the prospect of criticizing him in public. They certainly don't have that fear of the sitting president of the United States, and that tells you everything you need to know about Jim Comey.
All right, folks, that was Tucker Carlson talking about the timeline with James Comey, talking about everything that was going on there, what led up to that. And I do apologize. Sword, I got a new listener on, and he's in the chat room. I did lose the audio because I forgot to turn up my mic. Sword, I'm a one-man operation here. I'm doing all the engineering, setting up the videos and everything like that. That's one of the reasons why I started a Patreon account, so I can not only be able to support my family, which I don't need much of that right now, but to be able to hire folks to help me with the show. And one of those would be a call screener producer, someone that can run the computers for me while I actually go on the content. So hopefully you can hear me now. It looks like everything's working still. Like I said, I just forgot to turn my microphone back up. I do apologize for that. I do try my best here, and it's something I don't do videos a lot on the show, and as I do more of them, I'll get better at it. I do promise you that. I will get better at that. Let me see here. He does ask another question. I try to answer some questions in the chat room. I just want to read this. He's asking a pharmaceutical question, and I'm not even going to touch it. I have no clue. I have some pretty poignant opinions about modern pharmaceuticals, and more so recently since I've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. But I really want to get back into what we're talking about here on the show, and that would be the with Director James Comey and how this. I don't know how we got to today. I don't know how it dragged on this long, except Tucker Carlson talks about that for bureaucrat, which that is what the director of the FBI is, even though he's the top law investigator. I wouldn't say enforcer, but he's a top investigator for the Department of Justice, the director of the FBI, and it seemed like a lot of people were afraid of him. And that's not a good thing. To be quite honest with you, that's never a good thing. And so we have here, we have the situation that started last June where FBI Director Comey interjected himself into the campaign. In June, he did so again in October, and then right, at the beginning, at the end of October, just before the election, reopened an investigation of Hillary Clinton. And quite honestly, and this is the way it should be now, because I've been actually tracking these investigations. We haven't had a lot in the way of leaks or what's going on in the ongoing investigation of the Hillary Clinton emails, the Clinton Foundation, Benghazi, the State Department, and Russian interference, because they should be kept under wraps. They shouldn't be out in the public right now while they're still investigating, and there shouldn't be any leaks. And I think whoever was leaking some of this stuff in the FBI got kind of scared off by Trey Gowdy and the congressional investigations into the leaks, and because you haven't heard much about them. And every now and then you'll get something comes out in the news that's saying, that our investigation is still ongoing with Huma Ahmadin and Anthony Weiner and the emails there. and my friends in the anti-freedom groups that are out there that are dead set on a narrative that doesn't jive with the facts that are going on, that Hillary Clinton wasn't elected president, why are we still investigating her, blah 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 blah. I'm like, but if laws were violated and broken, she should be investigated whether she became president or not, and they don't agree with that. They absolutely don't agree with that. And I believe, and this is just something that I think about quite a bit, I believe that the anti-freedom groups out there are going to be surprised when these investigations are over, and they're going to be surprised who the light, if these investigations are kept unbiased and the facts lead them to a conclusion. I think there's going to be a lot of egg on a lot of people's faces out there. Now, I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong, but you know what? There is a body of evidence with the Clintons. I'm gonna stick with the Clintons right now from 1993 on, even before that. We're talking about when Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas. Way back in the day, we have a body of evidence of outright lying, manipulation, obstruction of justice, manipulating facts, the whole, everything out there. And nothing was ever Slick Willie's fault. Now that we have some political history of Hillary Clinton, nothing's her fault. The missing money in the State Department, that wasn't her fault. The 4 deaths in Benghazi, that wasn't her fault. The email server in her closet at home, that wasn't her fault. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody does it when they absolutely do not. And we've seen through the investigation, we've seen through reporting and some good investigative reporting, over the past year, where no, the State Department does not allow that, does not want that to happen. The whole, because it was outside of their servers or protections. No matter how minimal you think those protections are at the federal level, they were outside of their purview. And as far as I'm concerned, there is no reason for the Secretary of State to have a private server conducting the business of the federal government. I'm not going to say the American people, because there's a lot of business the federal government partakes in every day that doesn't pertain to the American people, and it should, but it doesn't. Because the federal government's doing a lot of things that's unconstitutional. My friends on the left, my antagonists on Facebook, on Twitter, those folks in Indivisible Group, Common Sense, Let America Vote, these George Soros-funded groups, very anti-freedom groups out there, the narrative now has changed with President Trump and Comey. Now everybody's up in arms that, Donald Trump fired him because he was getting too close on the Russian. And this is the narrative I've seen on Facebook and Twitter. Fired him because he's getting too close on the Russian investigation. And the problem with that, folks, I'm going to get over here to this article from One American News Network by Susan Heavey. But the problem with all that narrative is that Donald Trump just didn't unilaterally fire James Comey. It was on a recommendation of the deputy director of the FBI that he be fired. And again, I don't understand why, I do understand why Obama didn't fire him, because he didn't want to have to deal with the political storm that if he'd have fired him right after June, there would have been a real big political storm about that. I think from both sides. I think wrongly from both sides, but there would have been a political storm. James Comey did wrong back in June, and he should have been relieved of his duties back then and asked to step down, asked to resign. And a lot of this could have been avoided. But now the anti-freedom groups out there want to take this narrative, because what they do is they shape this narrative and propagandize it so it makes Trump look bad. And again, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I calls them as I sees them. And this is propaganda from the lamestream media, from the anti-freedom groups on the left. Now, if you're just new listening to the show, and according to the stats on my different sites, I get new listeners and followers of the show, maybe not daily, but weekly. you notice I'm not talking about a left-right paradigm anymore, because there's too many people on the left or the right that are mixed when it comes to their leanings, or they're conservative or liberal or whatever. And I've actually went to, it's called the Overton window, and basically the Overton window puts it in a more freedom, less freedom paradigm. And so that's what I've been going off of for a couple of weeks now, that if you are for the propaganda, if you don't want the truth, if you follow a narrative that you cannot back up with facts or truth or what actually happened, you are in the less freedom crowd. If you are on the other side of that, where you want to have the facts out, you're trying to put the facts out, you're trying to support freedom and liberty, you're on the more freedom side. So you're either for freedom or you're against it. It's just that simple. So that's what I've done on the show here, and I've had some people ask me questions about it, and it's not that they're confused about it, but they never thought about it in that way, the freedom, anti-freedom type, more freedom, less freedom. And so I just say freedom, anti-freedom. And there's a lot of people on the right, what people would call traditionally the right, like Paul Ryan. In a lot of instances in his stances, I'd have to put him on the anti-freedom side of things. And I'd be right to do so. So we have this article here by Susan Heavey, defending firing of FBI director. Trump decides, or derides, excuse me, Trump derides Democratic critics, the anti-freedom folks out there. Because again, this should have been taken care of by Obama, and it wasn't. And good or bad, James Comey interjected himself in the election. From June clear up until November 8th. Good or bad, and I think it was bad. I don't care if he didn't have anything on Hillary, or if he found so much on Hillary that he's like, man, we got to stop this woman from becoming president. Whatever his thoughts were, I don't think we've heard the end of this. I don't think we've gotten down to the bottom of this. I think once the investigations are over and done, I think we'll find out more about it. So President Trump's been forced to defend himself. This was posted this morning. Has been forced to defend himself, which I think he should. If he's going to fire somebody, in that high up in the bureaucracy, I think he should have to defend his decisions. And I think he's done a good job. Of course, those on the anti-freedom side of the scale are, they're not going to take his word for it. They're going to go with their own narrative because it fits their narrative about hating Trump. He's a psychotic. Again, on the social media, at least the people I follow and people want to post on my Facebook and Twitter, they have predictably turned this around and started calling again for a competency hearing of Donald Trump. And again, and I've had that. They've gone into some tirades on Facebook, especially, about how these, citing news stories from these psychiatrists saying, well, he's just insane, to put it bluntly. And I've come back and saying that's medical malpractice for these men and women who have not sat down and actually had a face-to-face interview with Donald Trump to pronounce that. Just saying. All right. The Republican president abrupt move on Tuesday stunned Washington and was swiftly condemned by Democrats and by some in his own party. A series of posts on Twitter on Wednesday morning, Trump sought to explain his move and lambasted his critics. Comey lost the confidence of almost everyone in Washington, Republican and Democratic alike. When things calm down, they will be thanking me, Trump said. The Trump administration said on Tuesday Comey's firing was over his handling of an election year FBI probe into the then Democrat presidential nominee Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server during her time as Secretary of State. Now, you would think that the anti-freedom groups out there would applaud him for this, because they were crying for Comey's head during this time. And this is one of the reasons that he cites. You think they would be happy about this. Okay. Though many Democrats have criticized Comey's management of the investigation, they said they were troubled by the timing of his dismissal, given that Trump could have acted soon after taking office on January 20th and that he has repeatedly criticized the FBI and congressional probes into the alleged Russian involvement in the election. Now, this is a difference between someone who came up through the ranks as a politician and someone who isn't. And Donald Trump is definitely in that second category. He did not come up through the ranks as a politician. And this is how businesses work. I'm telling you, this is how a businessman minds work. He hires people to do a job, and when they get done, you know, he might have given the FBI or the Department, let's say Department of Justice, because that's who the FBI actually reports to. He could have gave them a mandate saying, you know, we need to look into this. You need to see what the heck was going on with Comey during the election and what he's doing now. And I need some recommendations from you guys. Investigate this and you give me some recommendations. That's how a business mind works. A political mind would have worked just the opposite. I'm serious. It would have been a total mess the other way around. Now, asked if Trump had fired Comey over his handling of the Russian investigation, White House spokesman Sarah Huckabee Sanders said no. Frankly, if that's going to continue, it's going to continue whether Jim Comey is there or not. She told MSNBC in an interview. Some Democrats compared the move to the Saturday night massacre in 1973, in which President Richard Nixon ordered the firing of an independent special prosecutor investigating the Watergate scandal that eventually led to Nixon's resignation. And to compare it to that, go clear back to the Nixon administration, and I grew up during that whole controversy with Watergate in the early 70s. I was just in elementary school, but I remember the whole controversy around it and studied it since in history. This is nothing like this. This is nothing like this. The Watergate investigation was blown wide open and actually incriminated. The investigation itself incriminated Richard Nixon. This investigation into the Russian connections that are supposedly out there haven't led anywhere yet. Have not led anywhere yet. The only people that are incriminating President Trump are the anti-freedom groups out there. The only ones that are actually incriminating them. So, you know, you have that going on, this whole narrative going on out there. Democrats amplified their calls on Wednesday for an independent investigation into Moscow's role in the 2016 election. And if there is something out there, yes, I think they should investigate it. Whether or not there is, and this is the sticky wicket we get into. I think there has to be credible information, reasonable suspicion based on evidence, not on supposition, but based on evidence to go ahead with an investigation. It can't be just, well, we think this went on, and so we have to investigate it to see if there is something there. You know, reasonable, you know, in order to get a warrant, you have to swear to an affidavit that there's probable cause. And the only probable cause we have out there is propaganda from the anti-freedom groups in the lamestream media and in social media out there. That's all we have right now. Unless I'm missing something. Unless I'm actually missing something out there. And then they're talking about a constitutional crisis. And look, folks, being your constitutional warrior, I've studied the Constitution enough. President Trump has done everything in his power to make sure that the investigation goes ahead, whether he agrees with it or not. Jeff Sessions has backed away from the Russian investigation, turned it over to the deputy AG, that is where the FBI actually reports to. They've done everything, I think, reasonably within the bounds of the law to make sure there's no looks of impropriety, but it's not enough for the anti-freedom groups. It's just not. Good morning. Is it Handel Litter? Hello from Turkey. And I do have, folks, I don't brag about this a lot, but I do have a presence on several continents. China, Australia, Africa, now in Europe, in Turkey. I haven't had too many other European countries. I do have a following in United Kingdom, the UK. Handy, I guess that's how I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, and I'm sorry if it's wrong, but welcome to the show in the chat room on there. Hopefully you're enjoying this. Now, all the way down through here in this article, like I said, Democrat Senator Richard Blumenthal told CNN, what we have now is really a looming constitutional crisis that is deadly serious. I am sorry. Most, if not all, of the high-profile Democrat senators, including Richard Blumenthal, wouldn't know the Constitution if you walked up and put it in their hands and actually read it to them. Actually sat down on a park bench like you would a little kid and start opening up the Constitution and reading it to them. They wouldn't know the Constitution if you did that with them. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, we're talking way back 2010, when she was asked if Obamacare was constitutional or not. Oh, I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I can't speak to that. You took an oath to defend the Constitution, uphold and defend the Constitution, and you don't even know what the Constitution says? I'm not a senator. I'm not a Congress or a representative like Nancy Pelosi is, and I know what the Constitution says. I can see if something is or is not constitutional. It doesn't take a constitutional lawyer. The Founding Fathers never intended the Constitution to take a constitutional lawyer to either uphold or defend anything. Not one bit. Not one bit. And it's funny to me how now they're saying because of this firing, it's going to be a constitutional crisis. And again, Trump was acting on recommendation from somebody in the Justice Department that they asked to look into it. You look into this, you give us your recommendation. We're going to follow your recommendations. I am sure, as sure, and I know scientifically the sun doesn't rise or fall, okay? But I'm doing this metaphorically. I'm as sure as I'm sitting here in front of the great John Wayne desk, as the sun rises in the east, if this came out and President Trump didn't fire James Comey, that the anti-freedom groups out there would twist this around and still be hounding him about this. There is no winning with the anti-freedom groups, folks. There is no winning with people who put propaganda out. There is no winning with folks who put a narrative out that doesn't fit the truth or the facts. It just fits what they feel and they believe. And again, we talked about this on yesterday's show, how being a victim is a status. You know, it's a status that's in vogue right now. That, oh, I'm a victim. And I'm like, how is that any way to live your life? You just go around, I'm a victim, I'm a victim. You know, sometimes you just want, like in the old cartoons with Bug Bunny or something like that, you just want to reach out and grab them by the collar and you know, tell them to walk into this, you know. Wake up! As Earl Pitts would say, wake up, America! So, again, it doesn't matter what President Trump would have done here, if he'd have kept him on or fired him. It really doesn't matter to the anti-freedom crowd. I guess we'll boil it down to that. All it matters is they have a hatred for Trump because the forgotten men and women of America had dissed their ideology, had totally turned upside down their ideology by voting in Trump. And I'm sure there was a lot of Trump supporters out there that voted for Trump because he wasn't Hillary. Now me, if you're new to the show, I'm a member of the Constitution Party of the United States of America. In Pennsylvania, I've written in since 2008. I've written in for the President of the United States, the Constitution Party candidate, except for 2012. I got a brain fart and voted for Mitt Romney, went against my principles, and I'm never, ever going to do that again. Ever, 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 ever going to do that again. So I still feel bad about that today because I was caught up in the hype about, you know, stopping, you know, had to stop Barack Obama, and I don't think Mitt Romney was the answer. I think he would have been a worse president than Barack Obama if that is possible. If that is possible. So no matter, these folks hate Trump. They're going to continue to hate Trump. Trump could personally find the cure for cancer and give it to the world free, and the world be cancer free from here on out, and they'd still hate him. They would still hate him. All right, so not to beat a dead horse any further than that, I wanted to show you what was going on there. Now, as I said at the top of the show, and I only have about 11 minutes left of the show here. Let me get back over and just look at my timer here. Yeah, well, actually just at 10 minutes of the show left. I have some articles in here. One is by Gareth Porter over at antiwar.com, a flawed UN investigation on Syria. There's another article here from Global Research by Tony Cardalucci. Fake news alert, CNN finally admits white helmets stage fake videos. And this was posted back last November. And this is where I got onto the story about these white helmets. I'm like, who in the world are these white helmets? Now, I haven't done the legwork on this. I'm standing on the shoulders of people that have gone on before me. But One American News Network was reporting today on their network, on their news broadcast, that CNN was backing the white hat story, the white helmet story. And there has been, again, Gareth Porter talks about this. Tony Cardalucci talks about this. Veterans Today has an article by Ian Greenhalgh, Greenhalgh, and this was posted on May 8th, about white helmets' whole existence fraudulent, Oscar-winning film a fraud. And there's been an Oscar-winning documentary about the white helmets, and I come across this article this morning from offguardian.org. Open letter to Doctors Without Borders. MSF is Spanish, and I'm not going to butcher that. I'm just going to say MSF / Doctors Without Borders, about bias and propaganda in Syria. There are Doctors Without Borders in Syria helping the victims of this civil war. And just full disclosure, I don't know what's going on over there. I think we need a scorecard, like a baseball scorecard, to figure out the players to begin with and see where everybody stands. But from my standpoint, in this last alleged chemical attack, there has yet, unless someone can point me to the UN investigation. France says, oh, we're going to investigate this and get down to the bottom of this. And which I don't believe. Doctors Without Borders is over there. And I saw the story this morning, and it's a letter, and it talks about some of the facts and how it seems like there's not a lot of Doctors Without Borders actually talking to any of the reporters. Now, that could be, and I'm not casting any aspersions on anybody. It could be they want to stay out of the limelight. They don't want their pictures in the news or anything like that, because they could be targeted by Al-Qaeda or ISIS or one of those terrorist groups that people are fighting, or the rebels themselves in Syria, or the Syrian troops, depending on what your narrative is. Who's the bad guy here and who's the good guys? And this is I want to step back just a second here. And this is the trouble when you start sticking your nose into other people's business. And the founding fathers talked about, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, in their farewell addresses, talked about not getting involved in entangling alliances with foreign countries, especially over in Europe at that time, because it seems like all they've ever done would have been at war. Every time you turn around, there was another war that broke out over history in Europe. It seemed like they wanted wars. And the United States is a new country. We shouldn't get entangled up in all those internal politics. And I don't think we're still getting the truth out of Syria. I think antiwar.com has done some of the best work. They've had some good reports coming out of there. They got on the ground people that they talk to a lot over there. So I think antiwar.com is one of the better sources on this whole situation over in Syria. And another good source could be the Doctors Without Borders. But there again, I don't think we're getting the whole story. I honestly think they need to be debriefed, keep their names out. but verify who they are to make sure that they are Doctors Without Borders and they were treating these folks in the Idlib province or Idlib, Syria, where this last supposed gas attack went on. And I don't know about you, but it's amazing to me how little information we're actually getting out of there, and everything I think we're getting out of there right now so far has been propaganda and fake news, because nobody knows anything and everybody's got an agenda or a narrative that they want to advance. And I think the poor people of Syria are the ones that are paying the price for this. They really are. And Sword asked a question in the chat room, and I believe this is legitimate. I don't have a lot of time left, but I think it goes along with what we're talking about. He says, do you think religious doctrine, more freedom, less freedom? And you may not know me. I don't know how long you've been following the show, how long anybody's been following the show on here and heard, my stance on religion or anything like that. I grew up Catholic. When I got in the Navy, I was involved heavily with drugs and alcohol. And I wanted to get my life straightened around. I went to the Catholic priest, no answers, no help. And maybe that's, I'm not trying to cast aspersions on the Catholic Church, but, it's been my experience with Catholic priests, especially with military guys, that was my experience with them. And so I started looking around for other answers. And a buddy of mine, Alan, that I was serving with, he pointed me down, I believe, the right path. My buddy Dave, which you see in the chat room every now and then, and he's a frequent listener to the show. He also poses questions to me also. He's the one we sat down and actually went over some film strips called Jewel Miller film strips to give me a basic idea of what the Bible and New Testament is. And to make a long story short, do you think religious doctrine, more freedom, less freedom? I think it's always more freedom. But I think it has to be the correct religious doctrine. And this show is not the place for that. I can get into that sometimes with folks on the show, but this is not a preaching platform, this particular platform that I have here. If you want more discussion about this, Sword, please go over to my show notes page, danclementshow.com, and you can see you'll click down next to the homepage, contact. It gives my email address. You can ask me all sorts of questions, and I will endeavor to answer your questions. But the right doctrine, which I believe is the New Testament and the New Testament alone, is the right doctrine, because through Christ's death on the cross, he sets us free from sin and from the penalties of that sin. So yes, I believe it's more freedom, not less freedom. I don't think true religious doctrine like Christianity is not a you convert or die and anything like that. It's you decide whether you're going to follow it or not. It's true freedom, even in the choice whether you're going to follow God or not. So that's a short question to your answer. I know it may not suffice, but again, my email real quick is danc@constitutionalwarrior.com. I can put that down in the chat room. And that's my direct email address. You can send that to me, and like I said, give me a couple days and I'll answer it. And please keep your emails short. For me to read a 4 or 5 page email and try to answer the whole thing will take up way too much of my time. But I want to answer that correctly. And Dave Faulkner actually came in there and said, biblical doctrine limits us from sinful things like selfishness, but opens wide a freedom from guilt. Freedom from guilt, freedom from sin, things like that. So absolutely, Dave, and I appreciate you coming in there on that. All right, that's the music, folks, and that's the show. Appreciate everybody in the chat room over at YouTube. Appreciate Dave showing up, Sword, Andy from Turkey showing up on the show. Appreciate it. Please give me your comments. Please dislike the video. I'm open to any type of criticism you want, as long as it's constructive and stuff like this. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless. We'll see you tomorrow at noon.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.